Ayan. Recording na tayo. Ang topic natin for today is bonds and their valuation. Okay, sinusunod nga natin yung flow nitong syllabus mo. Okay na tayo dito. Nasa interest rates. Check lang natin yan. Palitan natin yung kulay. Yan, kulay red. Tapos na rin tayo dyan sa investments. Pero ito yung CAPM and security market line. Babalikan pa natin yan. Punta tayo dito sa bond valuation. Okay, yan nga. Makikita mo siya sa chapter 9 ng ebook natin. Okay. Ano-ano ba yung topics dyan sa bond valuation? Characteristics of bonds, parties in bonds transaction, types of bonds, bond price computation, yield to maturity, and yield to call. Okay. So, daanan natin yan dito, no? Ayan. Start natin sa introduction. Yan, basahin lang natin itong putting things in perspective. In previous chapters, we noted that companies raise capital in two main forms, debt and equity. Yun yan, no, binanggit na natin last time. Na sa debt and sa equity, kumukuha ng capital ang isang company. Okay. In this chapter, we examine the characteristics of bonds and discuss the various factors that influence bond prices. In chapter 10, we will turn our attention to stocks and their valuation. So, yun yung next natin na topic, no? Stock valuation. Okay, sa chapter 10 naman natin yun aaralin. Okay, ito yung learning objectives for this chapter. When you finish this chapter, you should be able to identify the different features of corporate and government bonds, discuss how bond prices are determined in the market, and what the relationship is between interest rates and bond prices, and how a bond's price changes over time as it approaches maturity. Next, calculate a bond's yield to maturity and yield to call if it's callable, and determine the true yield. So, nakita mo na kanina dito, no? Yung yield to maturity and yield to call. Yan. Explain the different types of risk that bond investors and issuers face, and discuss how a bond's terms and collateral can be changed to affect its interest rate. Okay, start natin dito. Who issues bonds? So, parang part siya nito, no? Parties in bonds transaction. So, sino ba nag-i-issue ng bonds? Basahin muna natin ano bang ibig sabihin ng bond. A bond is a long-term contract under which a borrower agrees to make payments of interest and principal on specific dates to the holders of the bond. Bonds are issued by corporations and government agencies that are looking for long-term debt capital. Okay, so sino daw nag-i-issue ng bonds? Corporations and government agencies. So, yun yung isang party, no, sa bond transactions. Okay, so try nga natin mag-drawing dito. Para lang, nandyan lang siya. Okay, so, corporation, paano ba natin i-drawing yan? Siguro isang malaking building na lang, no? Ayan, ito yung pinto ng building. Yung mga bintana. Ayan. So, corporation A na lang. Sa example natin, siya si issuer ng bonds. Okay. Ayan, itabi lang natin siya dito. Pero meron na tayong isang character. Okay. Sa isang party sa isang bond transaction. Okay, so dito nagbigay lang ng example, no? Ng bond transaction. Ayan. For example, on January 5, 2015, Allied Food Products borrowed $170 million by issuing 170 million of bonds. Okay, for convenience, we assume that Allied sold 170,000 individual bonds for 1,000 each. Actually, it could have sold 170 million bond, 17 bond each with 10 million face value, or any other combination that totals $170 million. In any event, Allied received the 170 million, and in exchange, it promised to make annual interest payments and to repay the $170 million on a specified maturity date. Okay. Ayan. So dito, binanggit lang, no? Until the 1970s, most bonds were beautifully engraved pieces of paper. So kaya nga bond ang tawag sa kanya, no? And yung paper, bond paper. O minsan tinatawag natin na coupon bond. Okay. Ayan. Pero ngayon, virtually all bonds are represented by electronic data stored in secure computers. Okay, and then ayan. Bonds are grouped in several ways. One grouping is based on the issuer. Ayan. So, the US Treasury, corporations, state and local governments, and foreigners. So, itong part na to, no, medyo theoretical pa lang siya, no? Basahin natin. Treasury bonds, generally called treasuries and sometimes referred to as government bonds, are issued by the government. It is reasonable to assume that the US government will make good on its promised payments. So, treasuries have no default risk. Ito, nabanggit na natin last time. No? Yung treasuries, walang default risk kasi nga, ayan, it is reasonable to assume that the government will make good on its promised payments. So, walang risk na mag-default. Okay. Yan yung treasury bonds. Next natin, corporate bonds are issued by business firms. Unlike treasuries, corporates are exposed to default risk. If the issuing company gets into trouble, it may be unable to make the promised interest and the principal payments, and bondholders may suffer losses. Okay. Ayan. So, itong corporate bonds daw may default risk. Okay. Default risk is often referred to as credit risk. The larger this risk, the higher the interest rate investors demand. Pangatlong pwedeng classification ng bonds is ito, municipal bonds. Ayan. Or munis. Is the term given to bonds issued by the state and local governments. And ayan, sabi dyan, like corporates, munis are exposed to some default risk, but they have one major advantage over all other bonds. The interest earned on most munis is exempt from federal taxes and from state taxes. Ayan, no? Medyo theoretical lang, pero daanan natin, no? In case lang na baka may lumabas na ganito somewhere sa mga exam mo, masasagot mo siya. Then ito, foreign bonds are issued by foreign government or a foreign corporation. All foreign corporate bonds are exposed to default risk, as are some foreign government bonds. Ayan. Puro definition pa lang, no? Mahalaga, madaanan mo man lang siya. O maging familiar ka man lang sa kanila. Okay, ayan. Key characteristics of bonds. Ayan. Although all bonds have some common characteristics, different types of bonds can have different contractual features. For example, most corporate bonds have provisions that allow the issuer to pay them off early. Yung tinatawag na call features. So, nakita mo na yung term na call dito, no? Oh, excuse me. May kinalaman kaya yan dito sa yield to call? Meron kaya yung kinalaman? Yung call feature na yan? Malalaman mo, no? Okay, but the specific call provisions vary widely among different bonds. Similarly, some bonds are backed by specific assets that must be turned over to the bondholders if the issuer defaults, while other bonds have no such collateral backup. Okay. So, mamaya titingnan natin yung mga yan. Ano ba yung mga bonds na merong call feature? Ano ba yung bonds na may collateral? Ano yung bonds na walang collateral? Okay. So, isa-isayin natin, no, yung mga characteristics ng bonds. Ito. Yung unang bullet point dito. Characteristics of bonds. Ayan. Underline lang natin. Para makita mo siya. Okay. Una, par value. Alam mo na to, no? Familiar ka na dyan. The par value is the stated face value of the bond. For illustrative purposes, we generally assume a par value of $1,000, although any multiple of $1,000 can be used. The par value generally represents the amount of money the firm borrows and promises to repay on the maturity date. Next natin is yung coupon interest rate. Yan, si Allied Food ulit yung example, no? Allied Food Products bonds require the company to pay a fixed number of dollars of interest each year. This payment, generally referred to as the coupon payment, is set at the time the bond is issued and remains in force during the bond's life. Typically, at the time a bond is issued, its coupon payment is set at a level that will induce investors to buy the bond at or near its par value. Alam ko may video dito kung bakit siya coupon eh. Bakit coupon bond, coupon payment yung tawag dyan. So play natin tong video.
Coupon payment and coupon rate. Right? This has to do with the interest that bonds pay to their bondholders. Right? The coupon payment is the dollar amount of interest that is paid each period, usually each year, to the bondholder. Right? Now, where this term comes from is back in the old days, bonds used to actually be pieces of paper. And what they would do is at the bottom of each bond, there would be a little coupon. And what would happen is every period, whether it's every year or if the bond paid interest every 6 months, the bondholder would clip out that coupon and send it to the bond issuer, and they would get sent back their interest payment, right? They would get paid their coupon payment. Now, how much they get paid would depend on the coupon rate. The coupon rate was the stated annual interest rate that was paid to the bondholder. So again, the coupon rate was the interest rate that they would get paid when you sent in that coupon if you were the bondholder. So those names still stick with us, even though today bonds aren't really physical pieces of paper, they're electronic, but the terminology still stays with us, and in many ways it makes sense. The coupon payment is the dollar amount interest paid to the bondholder, and the coupon rate is a stated annual interest rate that is paid to that bondholder.
Okay. So, doon in-illustrate lang, no? Kung bakit ba coupon payment yung tawag sa kanya. And coupon rate. Okay. So, check ko lang kung na-record ba yung video na yun, no? Okay. Check ko lang saglit.